Hello and welcome to this video on the product lifecycle. Now, many products go through various stages from their development until when they finally are ceased to be sold. The Volkswagen Golf is a good example of a product that's had a long life with many different versions. Likewise, Coca-Cola. Although some products have much shorter lifespans, and it's useful for the marketing department to understand where a product is within its life cycle and also how they can extend the life of a product. So in this video, we're going to look at the product life cycle diagram, look at each stage included in the diagram, and then finally move on to something called extension strategies. We're also going to assess the usefulness of the product life cycle model. So let's start off. What is the product life cycle? Well, the product lifecycle model is a theoretical model which describes the stages a product goes through over its lifetime. And here is our diagram. We have 5 stages that this product typically goes through: development, introduction, growth, maturity, and decline. And we would represent those looking at possibly sales revenue and profit. And what we can see is that during the period of development, there are no sales, and then sales revenue starts to rise as we go through the different phases of the product life cycle, and then begin to decline again. In terms of profit, profit is revenue minus costs. So at the start, we have a period where we have a loss. We're spending money, building up costs associated with developing the product, and then once we start to get revenue coming in, then the product master starts to make us a profit, eventually break even when it crosses the line, and then goes on to make us our maximum profit at this stage. So the product lifecycle is useful because we can use it to help forecast sales, manage cash flow, optimize the marketing of each product, and manage the range of products that a business offers. So let's now go through the stages. What happens during the development stage of the product lifecycle? Well, during this early stage, the business will normally carry out market research about the product, possibly design and test the prototype. During this stage, we tend to get high costs, and we can see those costs being built up by the negative profit or the loss that's being accumulated associated with the product at this stage. There'll be no revenue from the product. We haven't released the product to the public. We're just developing it, so no revenue. And this is where we kind of have a cash flow issue in that we need cash to develop products before we can then get the money back later. Now, it's worth knowing that many products never move beyond this phase. For every product that's successful, there's at least 1 or 2 possibly that have incurred costs that never made it to the introduction stage. Our next phase is introduction. This will involve the launch of the product, so actually introducing the product and making it available for customers to buy. Now, normally during this phase, we have quite high costs because we'll be spending heavily on promotion, and we won't be making that many items. Our capacity utilization will be low. Revenue is also likely to be low at this stage while we gain traction in the market. So again, there might be some potential cash flow issues at this stage. We might consider at this stage perhaps a price skimming strategy to recover early research and development costs, which again might lead to possibly lower levels of sales in the initial stages. Now, what we really hope is that the business or the product reaches the growth stage, and this is where our product really takes off. We'll experience fast output growth and a high level of revenue. Now, during this phase, as we sell more and more, we can benefit from economies of scale, buying in bulk and things like this, so we'd expect the unit costs to fall. This stage, the product might become more profitable, although we also might attract more competition to the market, which may involve changing perhaps the promotional mix or other elements of the marketing mix. Maybe in a price skimming strategy, here we start to lower the price. On a price penetration strategy, maybe we start to raise the price. Okay, the next phase here is maturity, and this is where sales start to level out, but it should be noted that we have quite a high level of sales here. It's also when the product becomes most profitable. So at this stage, the product should be generating a lot of cash. We sometimes call this a cash cow at this stage. Costs should be quite low. We've got large scale production. We might be attracting some competitors into the market. And we probably have a stable market share and potentially, hopefully, quite a high market share at this stage. The final stage is decline, and that's where we experience a fall in sales as the product comes towards the end of its life. Maybe consumers' tastes change, or more innovative products come onto the market. If we see profits starting to fall, or cumulative profits starting to fall, we might consider stopping this product. So if we look at some real life examples here, we can see Apple iPod sales from 2006 to 2014. And we can see the introduction period happened here. And after the introduction period, sales are quite low. The release of iTunes really helped iPod sales. And at that point, we can see there's a real growth in sales here. Then we have a maturity phase, high levels of sales, before eventually iPod sales start to decline before the end. So we'd say the iPod here follows a fairly classic product life cycle schedule. So we've looked at the product life cycle diagram and looked at the different stages. Now, if we have a look at a bit more detail at Apple iPod sales, we can say, yes, there was introduction, and then we saw some growth, and then we saw maturity before eventually a decline. Now, let's think about this a bit more carefully. What we want as a business is we want products to stay in the maturity phase for as long as possible. And what you can see is that the maturity phase wasn't quite short and then we had a decline. Actually, Apple were quite clever here and they managed to maximize the maturity phase. Now, if we look at this diagram or the data here, what we can see is that bringing out lots of different versions, every time they managed to bring out a version, would just prolong the life of the iPod in terms of its sales. So they were quite clever here with adapting the product to try and extend the maturity phase. And we call these extension strategies. An extension strategy is a method used to extend the life of a product, to prolong the maturity stage of the product life cycle and halt decline. So effectively what we're trying to do is adjust our diagram here so that the maturity phase is always being extended. How might we do this? Well, we might change the product. For example, with iPods, the Nano, the Mini developments from the classic iPod. We might extend the product range, for example, bring out different flavors. We might target a new market segment. So children's scooters, we might target maybe commuters. Look for alternative distribution channels, for example, selling coffee in petrol stations. We might consider adjusting the price. We might consider trying to change the way that we promote the products. All of these might be extension strategies we would use to prolong the maturity phase of a product. So in this video, we've looked at the product lifecycle diagram, we've looked at the stages, and we've looked at some examples of extension strategies. Now, why is it useful, this model? Is because if we can understand the shape and duration of the cycle, we can better understand how we should be marketing or how we should be changing the marketing mix for a product. Now, it is potentially quite difficult sometimes to use this model because we don't necessarily know the exact shape of and duration of the cycle from product to product. Decisions we make might change the traditional shape of the life cycle. It's sometimes hard to know exactly where a product is in its life cycle, and the length of each stage cannot be reliably predicted, and for some products, decline is not inevitable. Has Coca-Cola entered decline? You might argue probably not. So a problem is that a product life cycle might look different for different types of product. Here we can see quite a faddish product that's over quite quickly. Here maybe something like Coca-Cola, a classic product, we have quite a long maturity period. So there are some issues with this model as well. So again, we've looked at the product lifecycle diagram here, we've looked at the different stages, extension strategies, and then we've also said some reasons why actually this might not be as useful an approach to us to look at how we might change the marketing mix of our product. That's it. Thank you very much for listening.